and welcome to the Flourishing Center Podcast. I'm Emilia Zhivatovskaya, your host and founder of the Flourishing Center. We are training the change agents of the world and equipping them with research-based tools for healthy, happy, and successful living, and we're so grateful that you're here. Each episode features 3 sections. First is the Science Says section, where we summarize a recent research study and show you how to put the science into action. Next, we give you a research-based life hack with simple strategies for incorporating positive psychology into your life for greater well-being. And then our Practitioner Corner is where we interview someone who's out there living, breathing, and spreading positive psychology in their own unique way. Learn about how they're growing their personal and professional work and get inspired with strategies for how you might use positive psychology in your own life. Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to today's show. So excited to share our Science Says with you, which is a research study that came out exploring how we can make sure that when we face a failure, we do not get caught in a state of negative rumination that would strongly negatively impact our health. During our life hack section, we take that research and we put it into practice and say, how do we practice valuing and moving emotions through our body so that we don't get stuck? And in our Practitioner Corner, I'm so excited to introduce you to Seph Pennock. He is the co-creator of Positive Psychology Programs and PositivePsychologyToolkit.com, a dear friend and colleague who amazes me with the way that his mind works and the missions in life that he is committed to. And I can't wait to share him with you, as well as lots of other yummies that came up in our interview. Let's get started. Today's Science Says is an article recently published by McGurk and colleagues in the journal Emotion titled, Does a Culture of Happiness Increase Rumination Over Failure? Really fascinating research study that first explored this concept of comparing what do people value and how do their values impact how they react to failure. And what they found was that people who overemphasize the importance of happiness tend to actually ruminate more when they experience a failure. They also found a relationship to people who did not value negative emotional states and rumination, meaning people who tried to neglect or downplay the importance of emotions such as sadness, depression, and anxiety actually tended to ruminate more. They report that their findings suggest that over-promotion of happiness and in turn the felt social pressure to not experience negative emotional states might actually have maladaptive responses for our life, such as negative emotions as they relate to things like failures or setbacks in our life. They talk about how research shows that many people misunderstand what positive psychology is all about and actually the stance that it takes on happiness. We know that positive affect is an important measure of well-being. However, happiness is just one positive emotion. And people who overly intensely value positive emotions can actually have some psychological cost associated with it, meaning overly, extremely cheerful people might be more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors that may not be so healthy, might actually do things that contribute to a shorter lifespan, and even lower salaries, one research study in 2007 reported. What this reminds us is something that Aristotle had talked about thousands of years ago, which is the theory of the means, that we definitely want happiness and positive emotions, but none of these things in excess are what we're looking for. And these are not the things that positive psychology actually promotes. Positive psychology is not making happiness the goal in and of itself. Positive psychology is about helping people build their experience of positive emotions while teaching them to work with their negative emotions. And people who overly value happiness can actually engage in self-defeating behavior. What we want instead is for people to understand that emotions are things that they can work with, and that we want to build a wide variety of positive emotions, happiness being just one of them, but then also understand and value the fact that negative emotional states are not bad. They're just different. They impact us differently, and we want to teach people how to work with their negative emotions, such as sadness, such as worry, such as frustration. The key is not to neglect our emotions. In fact, this study showed that when people neglected those emotions, they tended to ruminate more than people who did not engage in those type of experiences. The authors write that modern cultures where happiness is highly valued might actually find themselves downplaying the importance of negative emotions, and therefore might make healthy negative emotions such as sadness something that's more pathological, or make it a bit of a taboo topic for people to talk about natural negative emotions. The authors also write that when people feel socially pressured to experience positive emotions and therefore not experience negative emotions, they tend to get more negative affect and less well-being. They also report feeling more lonely in response to those negative emotional events. And again, it makes sense if you don't feel like it's safe to feel what you're feeling because you feel that maybe the culture that you're in will not accept it. Other work has also shown that a failure to value negative emotions and negative affect might actually amplify the link between negative emotions and poor health outcomes, meaning that negative emotions within themselves don't necessarily cause people to have worse health. It's the stress response that we sometimes feel from those negative emotions, or not knowing what to do with those negative emotions, or thinking that something is wrong with you, that can actually amplify the stress that you would feel from a negative emotion. So I cannot emphasize enough that it's so important that we help people hear that positive psychology is not about happiness. It's not a happyology. That what we want to understand is positive emotions and negative emotions impact us differently, but they're all important. And the key is, can we actually metabolize, digest our lived experiences? Can we help people understand that negative experiences such as failure or loss can actually get in the way of us feeling happy, but if we don't allow ourselves to just feel it, then we are weighing ourselves down even more because we start getting caught up on what we think that we should feel and getting caught up on what we think other people's perspective of our experience is. And when we face these type of discrepancies, people might actually negatively reflect upon themselves or think that there's something wrong with them and actually end up focusing more on the symptoms of the distress that they're feeling and all the negative emotions that that brings. So the key is actually timeless wisdom. And I have recently seen the Mr. Rogers documentary, which if you haven't seen, it is just absolutely stunning. And one of my more memorable quotes by Mr. Rogers is he had a mission in this world, which was to help children know that all emotions are mentionable and manageable. And I think that here we are in 2018, McGurk and his colleagues have just confirmed that in this study, helping people understand that all emotions are mentionable and manageable. And happiness and overly valuing just trying to be happy might make us ruminate too much when we experience negative emotions or a negative event or a setback, because we think that maybe we shouldn't be feeling bad, as opposed to just naming the emotion that we feel and being able to move it through us, which is going to be the topic of our life hack. So thanks so much for listening, and let's move on to what we could do to help ourselves move negative emotions so that we do not get stuck, so that we do not ruminate. In today's Science Says, we looked at the importance of addressing people's perspective on emotions and how that impacts their rumination when they face a failure or a setback. The Science Says uncovered that when people overly value happiness, or they think that they should be happy all the time, when they face a setback, they might actually judge or criticize themselves and not allow themselves to fully feel their emotional state. Also, if people don't allow themselves to value their negative emotional space, they would face resistance as well. So what we want to explore in today's life hack is how to make sure that you do not get stuck when you face a setback. And so the first one has to do with the mindset around emotions and understanding that emotions are not good or bad. It's not positive emotions are good, negative emotions are bad. It's that they serve a different function. And so as you allow yourself to explore, what are my emotions telling me? My emotions are just energy in motion. They're little radars that are supposed to notify me of something that I'm experiencing. You can begin to use your emotions as information, as data, but the key is, can you keep that emotion moving? So we define emotional intelligence by 3 key factors: a person's ability to 1, notice how they feel, 2, name how they feel, and 3, navigate how they feel. This is emotional intelligence, and research shows that emotional intelligence is one of the key factors for success. And so you can keep yourself moving during any of the emotional experiences that you might face on a day-to-day basis by first tuning in. What am I experiencing? Noticing your body. What are you feeling in your body? We are sensual creatures, and so we usually experience our emotions as felt sensations. So what am I feeling in my body? What is the emotion that I am experiencing, which is different than a feeling, but can you name it? Can you name it as sadness, frustration, overwhelm, guilt, anger, confusion, dismay, disbelief, vulnerability? What is the emotion that you're feeling? And then can you actually move that emotion through your body? One of my favorite ways to do it is just to breathe into the sensations I feel, and as I exhale, imagine letting them leave my body. That's my favorite way to practice moving emotions. So I tune into them. I kind of like shine the little flashlight on them, and then I know that I can breathe my way through into what I'm feeling and allow it to move through my body, and use mindfulness strategies to not get stuck in an emotional state. Because remember, it's not that positive emotions are good and negative emotions are bad. The key is to be able to move all emotions through us, because we experience so many different emotions on a day-to-day basis, and all of the emotions serve a purpose. They only become problematic when we get stuck in them. So keep those emotional states going. Notice how you feel, notice your emotions, name them, and navigate them. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited for today's Positive Psychology Practitioner guest. We have Seph Fontane Pennock joining us from The Hague, Netherlands. He is the co-creator of PositivePsychologyPrograms.com, co-creator of the Positive Psychology Toolkit, and a bunch of other really, really exciting programs and products. And I'm so excited for him to share his story, because he has taken what I think some people might think of as an untraditional route to the field of positive psychology. And something you might not know about Seph is that he was actually a professional poker player once upon a time, which, as he and I have spoken about, actually has a lot of psychology in it. And I'm so honored to have Seph on, because he is a dear friend, colleague, and he has a lot of great wisdom to share about putting positive psychology into practice. So Seph, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah. So tell us, what brought you to this field?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, actually, I think if we go back a little, before I got into positive psychology, I started getting into psychology. And as you mentioned, I used to play poker. I don't know if I would say like professionally, but maybe semi-professionally. Anyway, it's how I made some money through college to pay for university and such. And that's how I got into psychology. I realized that there is way more to it than just analyzing numbers, but it also, at least in real life and also online, there's a lot of psychology to it. So that's how I started reading books out of curiosity into like how people behave under certain circumstances, and then I guess got dragged into the rabbit hole of psychology. And then I read somewhere, I saw the term like positive psychology, and it really resonated with me when I first saw the term. The same goes for a lot of people who are active and interested in the field. It's like the first time they see it, they're like, yeah, that's me. I'm going to dive into that, right? So yeah, the same thing happened to me. So I downloaded Tal Ben-Shahar's Harvard course. And so I followed that course. And yeah, he really introduced me to positive psychology through his course. I even like downloaded the syllabus that all of the students had, and I felt really cool. Like I felt like a Harvard student, doing the same readings. So yeah, it was super intrinsic. Really yeah, that's how I got into it. And then I started Googling for it. And I wanted to find like cool websites, maybe forums, or like some way to get engaged in the field online. And I didn't really find anything. And that kind of struck me like, hey, why is there no one who's created like a cool platform or website? The only thing that I found were like these, old HTML, boring university kind of websites, but nothing really up to date or like really valuable put together. So that's how I at some point decided, with the little knowledge that I had in building websites and online marketing, like, okay, let's do it myself. And I partnered with my current business partner, Hugo Alberts, who was a professor of psychology at the University of Maastricht at the time. And we decided like, okay, let's do this thing together, because he has all the in-depth knowledge and I had the expertise to actually build the platform and establish some reach, build a mailing list, etc. So that's how it all started.
I love that. One of the things I've always admired about what you've created is the process of thinking through, like, what do I want to see in the world? And let me go out and make it. It's a lot of how we've created the programs that we have here at the Flourishing Center as well. Like, our certification in positive psychology was actually what I wish existed when I was doing the master's degree in positive psychology, because we learned a lot of theory, and then it was like, why are we all going out and creating our own materials when everyone wants to give a workshop in what positive psychology is? So why don't we collaborate? Why don't we work together? Why don't we utilize materials that can be repurposed by a group of people? And I just think that it's, I admire your business perspective of just sort of thinking like, what do I want to need? And if it doesn't exist, maybe there are other people out there who are going to want to need it too. So let's go out and build it. And I just think that's really admirable.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that, first of all. But the idea that I had also really quickly, I was able to validate, like, okay, I'm on the right path here because of all the feedback I got from people. Not just feedback, but also tons of people reaching out through Facebook, for instance, like, hey, this is a really cool initiative. Can I help? Like, can I be a guest author for the website? Can I help with some of the research that you're doing to build up some databases? So I was getting tons of free, help from people who also felt like this was the right thing to build. So that's how it gradually grew and evolved.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that you covered, because of, as you said, your own intrinsic motivation, so many different topics within positive psychology. Which have been the most impactful to you personally?
That's a good question. Well, yeah, the first thing, what's really top of mind for me right now is meaning. I've always been reading into the intersection of philosophy and psychology. I really like existentialism, existential philosophy, and also existential psychology now. And nowadays, even existential positive psychology, which is like emerging field. So that's really where my personal passion is within positive psychology, so to speak. So I love helping people think about the important questions in life, and to think about the questions themselves as well. Like, if someone comes to you, for instance, right, with the question like, what is the meaning of life, or clearly with some existential questions, then I would regard that as a symptom, just like a general practitioner would like regard an aching arm or something as a symptom, and then start questions about the causes of it. So all of these existential questions, I'm very interested in. Why is this person at this point in his or her life asking this question? Like, what outcome is he or she hoping to achieve? And not that I have all the answers, but what my approach at least is to always take a good look at the questions, try to see whether it's the right question to ask, because some questions don't have answers, and you can look all you want, but you're not going to find anything useful. So that's my that would be my approach to it. Yeah.
One of the things I appreciate so much about that is this reminder that we can ask questions about how we're asking questions. We know there's a lot of research out there on the concept of purpose anxiety, the physical stress response that people experience trying to figure out what their purpose is in life. And I always say that if a person's asking the question, why am I here? What is my purpose in this world? That's one way of asking the question. And then you can ask the exact same question and say, why am I here? What's my purpose in this world? And you could ask the same question, right, from a very different lens. And so if we don't ask questions about how we're asking questions, that can strongly impact what role those questions play in our lives, and especially when it comes to existential questions, that giving people what I also hear you saying is that you're giving people a container with which to ask those questions in a specific way that is curious, that's empowering, that's generative. And I think that what I at least have experienced with the hundreds and thousands at this point of people that we've done positive psychology with is that if there isn't a container to do those type of questioning processes, and people are often just doing it on their own, they tend to default towards a more maybe like a narrowed perspective on how they even ask those questions.
Right. And I think asking a better question oftentimes can be the solution, or can really quickly lead to a solution. So for instance, if the problem that a person really at the core, deep down, is that he or she is way too self-centered and focused on the self and focused on his or her own problems, and that is what is triggering, causing a lot of the anxiety, then maybe asking the question, what is wrong with me? What should I do? Again, having that self-centered focus in the question might be the wrong approach. Maybe we should zoom out a little and realize that, and this is a quote I really like, that the universe optimizes for the whole, not for the individual. And this is always something to keep in mind. If you're so focused on yourself, not realizing that, on a somewhat larger scale, it's really not about you.
Not about you.
Not at all. So oftentimes that, or at least what it does for me, it provides a lot of space, some distance as well to the problems, where you can see okay, these are my problems, but it's really not about me here. Maybe I should be more concerned with the impact that I'm making, how I'm helping other people. And as soon as I change that focus, from self-centered to more outside of me, self-transcendental, if you will, that the problems might disappear as well.
Yeah, I love that. One of my favorite quotes by the Dalai Lama is, when we think of others, our mind expands. And that's often from a more Buddhist tradition, referring to things like loving kindness meditation, or when we experience compassion and we step outside of ourselves. But as you pointed out, we as human beings are also wired with this knee-jerk response to be self-centered and be me-centered. And that when we override that impulse, how we often feel better. We feel more connected. We feel more positive.
Yeah, and why is that? I mean, there are also some evolutionary reasons for that. If you look at reciprocal altruism, for instance, it's ingrained in us, and our society has changed rapidly, of course, but we haven't caught up with our own evolution to the point where reciprocal altruism doesn't work anymore. No, it's still inside of us. We still want to contribute to others, also because it's in the end coming back to us, and it's making us feel good to help other people still. So it's in our nature, and if you neglect that part of our nature because of the way our societies are constructed nowadays, and the trend of individualism, for instance, and if you mindlessly go with that and just focus on yourself, we're missing a big part of our essential nature, I feel like. And I love the Francis Bacon quote that says, nature to be commanded must be obeyed, right? So a lot of times people come with these existential struggles, they're not living in line with their true nature. And then for the practitioner, the question is, to find out how so?
Yeah.
Where is it going wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, and to zoom out the lens a little bit, the program that you've created is a container for people to take on these type of questions in a more systematic way. Can you tell us more about what you've found has been helpful for people as they take on some of these big questions like meaning in one's life through the programs that you've built?
Right. So meaning in life, I mean, there's a lot of literature into it. I'm not gonna get into the whole, problem of meaning, like the lack of a theoretical framework in the literature and stuff like that. Although I have a lot to say about it. But in terms of like useful answers to your question, I would say like meaning in life is really about how you are spending your time in life. That would be a more simple question to ask, which comes down to about the same thing. So, are you spending your time on the right things? The next question is like, what are the right things to spend your time on? And that is very subjective. That differs from person to person. So, I would say if you want to live a more meaningful life as an individual, that really starts with knowing yourself, self-reflection. Trying to like understand the way you're wired and what makes you feel good, what makes you feel fulfilled, what do you really want to achieve in life. It really starts with the self and with the relationship you have with the self, obviously. And if you have a good idea about like what you should be spending your time on, then just looking at your weekly schedule.
What are you actually doing?
Like, yeah, exactly. And a lot of times you find that there's hardly any overlap, between the pie chart, the wheel of life kind of thing, right? Where you have what you're spending your time on, what you want to be spending your time on. So then it's time to work on that. And it's by no means easy because then you're, working on behavioral change, which is super difficult, and there are tons of books have been written about it. But one thing that the mistake that people make, I think, is they want to make drastic changes. Like if they want to, start for themselves, for instance, right? They're an employee. Let's say someone is an employee, and he or she wants to become an entrepreneur. Like they think, I have to stop being an employee altogether, and then I have to start being an entrepreneur, like full on. And I think that's like some sort of like bias, or how do you call it, like a mental mistake that people tend to make.
I'm right there with you. I'm always advising our positive psychology practitioners and our graduates. I'm always like, don't quit your day job. Especially when you're stepping into a service-oriented field like ours, because firstly, everything takes time to build. Even if you have lots of connections and lots of people, that's still a lot of seeds that you have to water, and it takes time for those things to build. And especially for people who take on work such as, let's say, coaching, where they're working with individuals, the last thing you ever want is to feel like you need your clients to stay with you, because coaching's working well because with every session you're needed less and less. And with every session I do with my clients, my goal is for them not to need me. So if I am still trying to establish myself in one business because I've completely left another, it makes it really difficult. So I'm right there with you. My advice to people is always don't quit your day job. And if you're passionate, then you hustle, which I know actually you did too, Seph. So would you just tell us really briefly how you built out this company, but you didn't just overnight decide, I'm going to go start building an online platform and online digital tools and just like take a plunge off the high dive into technology land, right?
Yeah, so actually for me, I guess I didn't take my own advice, or didn't have that piece of wisdom yet, because what I did is like I quit everything completely and completely turned my life around at some point. So that's interesting for me to say. But I really realized that my life wasn't going in the right direction. I was working full time in Amsterdam for a startup company, and although I liked the job, like relatively speaking, I guess, I didn't like being an employee. I didn't like working for someone else, and I wasn't building and creating what I truly wanted to create. So I realized also I was in a relationship that had kind of died out, wasn't really too happy anymore in the relationship. So I traveled to the United States, and someone asked me like a question that confronted me like with my own life at that moment. And I just knew, like immediately I knew, like I need to turn things around in my life. So I got back to the Netherlands and had a couple of tough conversations that week. So broke off my relationship, quit my job, sold the house that I was that I was living in, and before I knew it, I registered at the Chamber of Commerce in the Netherlands, opened up my own kind of consultancy business. And then my life
Cool.
was completely different. But I haven't regretted any of those decisions. Like I just intuitively I knew it was the right thing to do, and it was tough. But sometimes you
Yeah.
need to make tough decisions if you want your life to go in the right direction.
Yeah. I love that.
And the last thing I want is to look back on my life. It's the Tolstoy novel, right? The Death of Ivan Ilyich. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but like on his deathbed, the main character asks himself, what if it has been wrong? What if all of this has been wrong? And to me, when I read that was like the saddest question ever, you know, like what if you were to be on your deathbed and you ask yourself that question and you can't give like a confident answer to it of like, no, I did what I wanted to do in life. Oh man, I just get goosebumps like talking about it now, because that would be the saddest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it is the saddest thing in the world, right? Like misliving your life, the idea of mislived life.
Yeah.
So I want to prevent that at all costs, not just for myself, but also for other people. And that's why I'm so into the field of meaning right now, to also help others with that.
It's so interesting that you say that, because on Monday I just gave a lecture series for our positive psychology students on the science of grief and coping with death. And I've found myself kind of like in the closet, that being an area of really deep interest for me since I was 14 and went through my first major loss, which was the loss of my brother, who passed away in an accident. But then from that, you know, my mother died, friends, fathers and parents have died, friends died of drug overuse and all sorts of other things. And I've been really fascinated about how we as a society cope with death, and supporting people on every end of the spectrum, whether it be being with people who are on their deathbed to people who have lost. But one of the things that really stood out in my mind was a very Buddhist principle, where in the Buddhist tradition you actually do meditations where you meditate and imagine and you contemplate your own death. And it's like the thing that always stood out for me was that taking the time to actually think about how I will die, or how I want to be remembered when I die, or if I want to be remembered when I die, what do I want to be remembered for, all of these types of questions, which very few people in our culture tend to actually talk about, are meant to inform us to think about, how do I want to live, and to use this one inevitable thing that will happen, to do as you say, like ask this question, like, would I be living with regrets? Would I continue to do what I do right now? And I think that those are some of those, again, existential questions that I think are fascinating, that we don't really have containers to not just ask ourselves these questions, but also have meaningful conversations with others about them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing the signs that we're moving in that direction, and the field of meaning is definitely emerging. So I'm really excited for the next years to come, because I think some great works will come out. And a friend of mine, Dave, at a company called Holsti, he just launched a set of meaningful conversation cards. So it's actually a deck of cards, but they have all these prompts on it in order to open up meaningful conversations with a group of people. And I did it at his place a couple of weeks ago, and it was amazing. Like, I had such a profound night, like talking with, for me, complete strangers, but his friends. But it's really powerful. Yeah.
I appreciate that so much, because it reminds me of the research by Dr. Arthur Aaron on the 36 questions for falling in love, which were questions that were basically meaningful conversations that got people to deeper and deeper levels of intimacy. And you could bring complete strangers together, but when they start talking about things that are important and have an opportunity not to be forced into intimate conversations, but kind of naturally ease into them and develop a sense of trust, the kind of connection that people feel with one another and having those conversations, and then the impact it makes her well-being. I remember seeing another study that looked at meaningful conversations compared to people who do more like small talk, and there was obviously a correlation between frequency of meaningful conversations and scoring high on happiness and well-being. And obviously they're saying it's a correlation. We don't know if it's just happier people tend to have more meaningful conversations, and or meaningful conversations make us happier. But most of the time, we just need a container, whether the container be a deck of cards or an experiment that you're participating in, or a vulnerable, brave stranger that's going to ask a meaningful conversation and risk looking like a person looking at you going, why are you asking me that?
Yeah.
But being willing to do it anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to take the risk. Like, one of the things that's driving the whole meaning crisis that we're seeing nowadays is a lack of connection, a lack of belonging. It's very interpersonal. We used to have way larger family sizes, obviously way less one person households, right? Like that's been growing rapidly. Religion, like as Nietzsche already proclaimed, like God is that, right? Like we can clearly see that in our society nowadays, and he said that in a way that was like, I can see this becoming a problem, because what it's leading to is that people are, everyone is on an island.
Yeah.
It's everyone by themselves. I mean, you're living in Manhattan, so I guess and you see that in your everyday life as well, where everyone is just passing by each other as like, not even ants collaborate more. I wanted to say ants, but even they collaborate more, or they have a common purpose that they're striving towards. So I think one of the things that's needed is really to bring back this sense of connection. So in any way, any possibility you see for doing that, like go out and take it, and no one else is going to do it. Like you have to step up and do it. If you see an opportunity for that, you have to take responsibility to do that. So I think that's one of the things that could get us out of this crisis of meaning, if you will, the fastest. Yeah.
It's funny because as I was commenting on earlier, the conversation we were having about you creating the types of things that you yourself wish had existed, when people ask me like, why did we build out this community for positive psychology practitioners that like do our training, and a lot of it was like, that was what I was needing, because prior to this work I was a solopreneur, and like you said, living in Manhattan, there were days where I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't leave my apartment. I've got a dog who's wee pad trained, and I've got Amazon that delivers and Fresh Direct that delivers, and then I had this like wake up moment where I was like, I worked as a coach and had lots of quote unquote deep conversations with people over the phone, but like I had not left my house or seen another human being in days, right? So oftentimes it was creating the community that I wanted to be a part of, that I needed to be a part of. And we know that we humans are hive creatures, and we're like bees. We need to feel like we belong. We need to feel like we matter, and we need to work towards something bigger than ourselves. And this is genetically wired within us.
Absolutely. And I think you've done an amazing job at like bringing a group of wonderful people together. And like every couple of months you do it again, right? And I think all of these people are building relationships there at the Flourishing Center that will last for a lifetime, and they'll always remember that, and probably are still in touch with their cohort members and everything. So that's beautiful. That's like a meaning making machine that you've got going there.
Yeah, which I'm totally brought down to my knees humbly about, because we just create the container, right? It's like the people that bring the magic. But just this week we had somebody stop by the office, a friend, they've been friends, they were part of the very first CAP program we ever ran. We're on our 68th cohort right now, so they were part of the first one, and these two have been best friends ever since. And we've got Capsters having a pool party this weekend, and in Toronto they're having like dinner together. That makes my day. Thank you so much, Seph. Before we wind down our conversation, one of the things that we love to ask our positive psychology practitioners is that in the field of both positive psychology and mind-body medicine, we say our motto is self-care is healthcare. And I'm curious, what are some of the self-care practices that you take on that support your well-being?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Well, one of the foundational beliefs we have at at our company is that the relationship to the self is everything. That's like foundational. It's key. One of the specific self-care practices. Sorry, I just had to think about this for a moment. This thought came up about I remember being called the platinum rule. It's like, don't do unto yourself as you wouldn't do unto others. I really like that line, and sometimes I think about it like, would I be this strict for like my partner or for an employee or for someone else? And I was like, no. So why am I bitching on myself so much? So that's one of the things that comes to mind right now. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great self-care. Yeah, that's great self-care. Compassion for yourself, right? I think that we live in a culture where we sometimes glorify, like, look how much I can beat up on myself, and there's nothing holy about that. It's beautiful. Seph, how can people find out more about your upcoming programs and the different tools that you have available?
Oh yeah, right now it's still super scattered all over the internet, but we're putting it all together on the positivepsychology.com website later this year. Right now you can find us at positivepsychologyprogram.com, and that will lead you to all of our resources where people can also subscribe to get my weekly emails. So that's it, positivepsychologyprogram.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And for those of you listening, if you are practicing positive psychology, whether it be in an organization with individual clients, if you're teaching classes, do check out their toolkit. It makes it so easy to learn the science and put it into practice directly from what it is they've created. They also have a mindfulness program and this wonderful work that we've been talking about, these powerful questions around meaning and purpose, is a product that they have as well. And so do check all of those out. Seph, thank you so much for being here, and we hope to have you again soon.
Yeah, let's do it again soon. This was cool.
Wowza, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying this podcast. If there is anything that you want to know more about, an intervention, a topic, you need some support in how to navigate positive psychology with your teenager. Maybe you're an expecting mom and you want some tips there. Maybe you're running a company and you want your corporation to feel that positive organizational culture that we often speak about. Reach out to us. I cannot begin to tell you how much it would make my day to get a message from you that says, Amelia, I want you to tell me more about this topic and what the positive psychology perspective is. So please send us a message, info@theflourishingcenter.com. And as always, I wish you an incredible flourishing day. And if you have not yet had a chance, please check out the fact that we've got a new round of programs coming up in the fall. We have our resilience programs. We have our certification in positive psychology program. We've got our coaching certification programs coming up for our existing graduates. Lots of goodies on our website, www.theflourishingcenter.com. Until then, so much love to you wherever in the world you are, and I hope that we get to connect soon.